The most popular Subaru in 2023 isn't the Forester, Outback, or even the Impreza. It's the Crosstrek, which started out as a lifted version and more rugged version of the Impreza hatchback, has now become one of the hottest selling subcompact crossovers here in the United States. When you take a look at vehicles priced around $30,000 in this segment, most of them are either front-wheel drive only or offer all-wheel drive at a premium, whereas Subaru has a very successful formula with the Crosstrek. You get super symmetrical all-wheel drive standard, you also get versatility, practicality, affordability, and also a vehicle that is fun and inspiring to drive. Now today I'm sitting next to the 2024 Crosstrek, which is the third generation. And throughout the past 10 years, not much has changed from the outside. And you're probably wondering, well, it just looks like a cosmetic refresh. Well, there's a lot more to this vehicle than meets the eye, and that's why I am here. We're going to go over everything about the 2024 Crosstrek. Take a look at the exterior, the interior, take it out for a test drive, see how it compares to last generation, and also see why, if you are looking at buying a subcompact crossover at around $30,000, then maybe taking a look at the 2024 Subaru Crosstrek might be a great decision. Now before we get in this video, I want to give a huge shout and thank you to Subaru of Wakefield in Wakefield, Massachusetts for allowing me to this review. The link will be in the description below, so you can check out their extensive Subaru inventory. And speaking of inventory, Subaru of Wakefield is home to the largest selection of Subarus in New England. If you're looking at buying a brand new 2024 Subaru Crosstrek, they have a few available on the lot as I speak. They have plenty of WRXs, Foresters, Outbacks, and Ascents. So if you are looking at buying a brand new Subaru, make sure that Subaru of Wakefield is your destination for your brand new vehicle. Another thing to note about Subaru of Wakefield is that they're very active in the local community, but also work with charities throughout the year. And that's one of the reasons why I have returned for the past 4 years to feature all my Subaru reviews here at Subaru of Wakefield. Also, before we get started, make sure to hit the subscribe button and click the notification bell so you're notified every time a new video goes live on the channel. And so, without wasting any further time, let's get right in this review. The subcompact crossover market's appeal throughout the years has solely been connected to the affordability that's tied in with these vehicles being economical for Americans on a budget. Yet it's the Subaru Crosstrek that single-handedly challenged the conventional thought process to developing a successful vehicle in this segment. Sure, the Crosstrek checks off the same boxes as its competitors, but the purpose behind its existence goes far beyond just being an entry point for the brand to appeal to current and future Subaru loyalists, as its versatility and available features blurs the lines between being a base model and a smaller version of a Forester or Outback. Starting off with pricing, the Subaru Crosstrek we have today is the Premium, coming in at just over $26,000. And is somewhat of a mid-tier trim for 2024 that slots just below the Sport in the lineup. At first glance, it appears as though not much has changed besides some cosmetic enhancements. However, Subaru modified their global platform that underpins the Crosstrek, which will bring with it a list of benefits to the on-road performance, but also the overall refinement, where despite being one of Subaru's most affordable vehicles, it's going to feel marginally more similar to the Forester and Outback than in the past. While the suspension has been retuned for 2024, you'll still have the same class-leading ground clearance of 8.7 inches. And for those wondering, dimensions mostly go untouched, especially for the interior, keeping this subcompact crossover both practical and versatile. What hasn't gone untouched is the front fascia, as the Crosstrek undergoes a rather important transformation, taking some styling cues from the Outback while also getting a unique appearance that separates itself from the rest of the crossover lineup. Starting up top, thinner and sleeker LED steering responsive headlights and a reshaped hexagonal grille design does give off sportier vibes for 2024. And not seen on the prior generation is a thin gloss gray trim piece that flows from the headlights to the Subaru emblem. Similar to its larger sibling, the plastic cladding for the fenders and bumper becomes more pronounced around the now standard LED fog lights for the Premium. While ultimately, most of the Crosstrek's road presence is heavily influenced by the Impreza hatchback it's based on, it seems like for the third generation, Subaru is deliberately evolving the Crosstrek into being a more capable and fun subcompact crossover that's multi-dimensional and chosen by customers not only for its pricing, but because of the value and capability it's offering. Moving over to the side profile, the Premium will be sitting on 17-inch alloy wheels, but 18s do come standard for the Sport and Limited. With the smaller tire size, the ride quality and comfort is what you'd expect for a crossover in this market and price range, and is arguably better in most cases when you consider that the Crosstrek also has a higher ground clearance than all of its rivals. Showing its relation to the WRX, the active air outlets improve the aerodynamics for this crossover, adding some much needed stability to the on-road performance. You'll have dark gray side mirror caps, which will also be present for the Limited, with integrated turn signal indicators. And while not equipped on our model, blind spot detection is available for the Premium. Then coming around to the back, the alterations to the road presence are just as substantial for the rear fascia as they were up front, as the Crosstrek receives reshaped taillight housings that follow a similar design path to the Ascent, giving this crossover a more aggressive and upscale look. But as we've seen throughout the exterior, the plastic cladding has also been remolded around the reflectors, wheel arches, and rear bumper, beefing up the ruggedness for the Crosstrek, while at the same time setting us up for the all-new Wilderness trim for this generation. More importantly, the Crosstrek retained its hatchback body lines, and fundamentally isn't a deviation from its predecessors that's helped propel this crossover to the top in this market. Under the hood, for the base and Premium, you'll receive the 2-liter 4-cylinder engine, producing 152 horsepower and 145 pound-feet of torque, which is paired with a CVT. While cosmetically and technologically much has changed for the Crosstrek, the powertrains transition over from last generation to the 2024 model, including the 2.5 that's standard for the Sport and Limited. In terms of accelerations and straight line speed, the Crosstrek feels very much the same as last year, but as we'll discover during the test drive, the revisions Subaru made to the platform add a new dimension to the driving dynamics, where this subcompact crossover feels sportier and more inspiring to drive. A key selling point for the Crosstrek is that Subaru's symmetrical all-wheel drive system does come standard for all trims, and when it pertains to fuel economy, you're looking at right around 27 miles per gallon in the city and 34 miles per gallon on the highway. Stepping inside, you're greeted by manually adjustable cloth seats for both the driver and passenger. However, for an additional $2,245 through an optional package, you receive power adjustability for the driver's side, heated front seats, a power moonroof, and blind spot detection and rear cross traffic alert to offer more value at around $30,000. Not receiving enough attention for this generation is the smaller details, such as the padding along the door panels and more pronounced synthetic carbon fiber trim found throughout, as Subaru not only updated the dashboard and user interface, but also the refinement as a whole. In front of you, between the analog gauges, you will have a familiar display that will be home to your diesel speedometer, tire pressure monitor, fuel economy, time of day, and exterior temperature. And by using the toggle mounted on the left side of the steering wheel, you can scroll through this display to showcase the information that's most relevant to you. Then moving over to the infotainment system, the Crosstrek now receives the 11.6-inch touchscreen with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto compatibility, replacing the dual screen setup that was offered last generation. Now you have a cleaner layout that does limit button clutter, as the buttons for the front and rear defrosters, the dual zone climate control, and dials for the volume and tuning are mounted on both sides of the head unit, with the fan speed and AC controls integrated into the screen found at the bottom. If you remember the multicolor information display that sat above the user interface on the dashboard last year, that's all moved to the top of the screen. Similar to the 6 and 8-inch touchscreens, the Starlink infotainment system for 2024 has the same layout, with quick access icons that get you to different menus. And for all intents and purposes, this is basically a tablet molded into the dashboard, which should become second nature to use after a few minutes. The vehicle settings will also have their own menu, including the ability to activate X mode and your eyesight driver assist technologies. As always, you will have a rear backup camera with trajectory, and as previously mentioned, rear cross traffic alert is optional. Below, you'll have a cubby for a smartphone, and you'll also have a USB-C and USB input. 2024 also brings with it a restyled center console, where the cup holders are staggered and there's a noticeable scale back on the gloss black trim. And to round out the front seating area, for the center storage compartment, you'll have enough room for smaller items. Now moving on to the second row, we're going to sit off on the passenger side. And this seat has been adjusted most of the way back and is on a recline. And I have a good amount of legroom here, relatively speaking, for a vehicle in this market. Because when you compare this to a Mazda CX-30 or even a Hyundai Kona, it can get cramped very quickly, especially if you have someone on the height of 6 feet tall sitting in front of you. Whereas with the Crosstrek, it is pretty spacious, especially when it comes to shoulder room, which is a bit of a surprise for a vehicle in this market. Now when it comes to headroom, I think if you're on the height of 5'8" or 5'9", you don't need to worry about hitting your head on the headliner. More importantly, you can have your kids back here sitting comfortably, but also if you have your friends tagging along on a longer drive, they won't be complaining at all or feeling claustrophobic. Now moving on to the center seat, you are going to have some good placements for your feet. There is an aggressive center hump, which will take away from legroom and possibly shoulder room as well. But for a vehicle in this market, it's not common to find a crossover where you can fit a third person in the center. Now with the Crosstrek, you might be able to squeeze that third person on a shorter drive, so keep all of that in mind. And then on the driver's side, this seat is adjusted to someone of my height, around 5'5", and I have plenty of legroom where I can just sit back and relax and enjoy the driving experience. And that's one of the reasons why I think that if you are on a stricter budget and you're cross-shopping the Crosstrek with the Forester and the Outback and you're thinking, you know what, I don't really need a larger crossover, that's where I think the Crosstrek slots into place very nicely in the lineup. But also, if you want to buy a vehicle at around $27,000 or $28,000, the Crosstrek is a great option just because it is very practical and spacious for the interior. Now, surprising to see for a vehicle in this market, you do get a USB-C and USB input, and if you're lucky for most rivals, you're going to get a 12-volt outlet. So this is fantastic to see for this generation. And rounding out the second row seating area, you do get a center armrest with 2 cup holders. Now coming around to the back, no changes for 2024. You're not going to receive a power liftgate, but we don't see that a lot in this market. Now behind the second row seat, you're looking at right around 20 cubic feet of room, which is pretty much on par with what we saw for last generation. I was able to fit all my camera gear back here, no problem. So it has 2 bags of camera gear, a gimbal box, and a tripod. That's one of the reasons why I think the Subaru Crosstrek does very well with a wide range of consumers, because it is very practical. If you're somebody who is on a stricter budget and you don't need a crossover the size of the Forester or the Outback, you have plenty of room to go on a weekend getaway with a significant other or even the family, as I think you could probably fit 5, 6, possibly 8 bags of luggage back here. Also, it is deceptively wide, so you can fit some longer items as well. Then with the second row seats folded, you're looking at right around 54 to 55 cubic feet of room, which once again is pretty much identical to what we saw last year. And it does fall in line with other subcompact crossovers in this market and also hatchbacks as well. So if you are on the fence and you're wondering, should I go with a vehicle that's a bit more versatile, but I also want to have the small hatchback design, I think that's where the Crosstrek really comes into play and is a great option and alternative. Then on either side of the rear cargo area, you will have some cubbies for some smaller items, such as maybe a couple water bottles, car detail equipment, or maybe even a first aid kit. Then beneath the floor mat, and really great to see, you will have a spare tire. So that way if you encounter a flat on your road trips or travels, you can fix that and be back on the road. Now, not equipped on our model today, but it is in the packaging back here, is your rear cargo cover, which will keep all your valuable items out of sight. So if you are like me and you have camera gear or anything else of value, you can leave them back here and have that peace of mind knowing that no one will be able to peek in and steal what you have. And for the moment we've all been waiting for, let's take the 2024 Crosstrek out for a test drive and see how it compares to last generation. Subaru has never really been known to make wholesale changes to their vehicles or their lineup in general throughout the last 10 to 15 years. When you take a look at the Crosstrek more specifically for this review, but also even the Forester and Outback, throughout the generations, it's the same vehicle you've always known and loved. Sure, they've changed platforms, adding some rigidity, better refinement, newer technology, and have really worked on giving you a driving experience that is going to be enjoyable at around $30,000, while also adding some powertrains that really are going to help propel this vehicle to new heights, which is why I think with the 2.5 that was brought in for last generation, it made a huge difference to the Crosstrek, because a lot of rivals are using lower powered engines that really lack the enjoyment that you're looking for in this price range and market. But for the Crosstrek, you have a vehicle that is really giving you quite a bit, not only on paper, but when you are behind the wheel. And 2024 takes things one step further. So the suspension has been stiffened up by around 10%, giving you a bit more confidence in the corners. You feel that with the steering as well. And we're going to find that out when we go on some rotaries and on some back roads, where this vehicle is going to feel a lot more planted to the roadways, but also overall when you are driving around town or on the highway, it's going to be a bit more of an upscale experience for you. Now, since we are at a red light, I might as well go over the front vision that you have here to work with for the 2024 Crosstrek. I have noticed some minor updates and some minor improvements. Now, it's the same thing when it comes to looking out the front window. You have a nice panoramic view. A-pillars are super thin, so I don't think you need to worry about having blind spots when you are approaching intersections. But to me, the side mirrors are a little bit bigger than they were last generation. And when I was on the highway or even on some back roads, I could see everything in my blind spots, and I could see what was going on in the other lanes when I was on the highway. And it's something I didn't feel with the last generation. Then taking a look out back, you do have a decent sized rear window, even though this is a hatchback. And even with the headrest in the way, I can see what's directly behind me. So you have a lot of vision here, which adds to the safety that the Crosstrek is providing. And of course, you have all those safety systems that I think makes this crossover perfect for anybody, whether you are somebody who's around 60 or 70 years old and you're looking for a safer vehicle, or maybe this is your first ever new crossover that you're looking at buying and you're a younger driver with less experience. This is going to be a great option for you. What I've noticed immediately is that the interior and the cabin is higher quality than last generation, and it's just very marginally, but you certainly notice that if you have driven an older Crosstrek back-to-back with a 2024 model. Even though we have just the cloth seats on the Premium, they provide a lot of support and a lot of bolstering, which is a bit of a surprise for a vehicle that's not sports tuned or geared for enthusiastic driving. And you notice that with the suspension as well, where it is more focused on comfort rather than being dynamic. And yet they've done enough where there is that noticeable improvement from prior model years. When it comes to the steering input, it is tighter and firmer than it was in the past, giving you more confidence in the corners. Now, a lot of that can be because they stiffened up the suspension, but also the steering rack is from the WRX, so you're going to have a bit more agility in the corners, which I think is really great, but also this will be more important when we get the 2.5 later this year. There's not as much body roll either, so it does feel a bit more planted to the roadways. And while they're not drastic changes, Subaru made enough improvements where it doesn't feel like a carbon copy of what they just had with the 2023 model. On the brakes, nice and strong. Into the corners. Steering is very responsive, and I think far better than what we had seen in the past. Certainly feels more athletic for sure. Also, another thing too is that even though we have the 2-liter 4-cylinder engine with 152 horsepower and 145 pound-feet of torque, it does have some good low-end torque when you are accelerating responsibly. Now, of course, there will be some droning since you do have the CVT. However, the CVT does mimic the gear shifts quite well. And Subaru has made some leaps and bounds with their CVTs where it does simulate the gear shifts very smoothly and it almost feels like a traditional automatic. So let's get on the highway. Let's see what the performance is like. I'm not expecting too much of a difference, but let's see if there's any confidence when you are entering the highway and passing slower drivers. Now I'm already up to speed here. See if we can pass the slower Corolla. Plenty of power. Plenty of power. Now at highway speeds, it does feel pretty composed on the roadways. I do feel as though that it feels a bit more planted than last generation, even though ground clearance hasn't changed at all, so it's still 8.7, but it stays in its lane, and with the firmer steering, you don't feel as though you're swaying out of this lane. It feels a bit sportier than it did in the past. Now at highway speeds at around 55 miles an hour, road noise really isn't that bad at all, and that was one thing that Subaru really focused on with this platform and chassis, which was to limit some of that outside world entering the cabin, and they certainly achieved that for sure for 2024. When you take a look at the sales figures for the subcompact crossover market, you're probably wondering what has made Subaru so popular and successful in this segment with the Crosstrek. Why are they blowing away the competition in almost every metric? And a lot of it is because Subaru gave their smallest vehicle, their smallest crossover, the same features that you're going to find on a Forester or Outback. And especially for 2024, you now have the same infotainment system that's found in the Outback, Legacy, and Ascent, which I think will go a long way, especially for people who are looking for more technology in their cabins. But also you have Subaru symmetrical all-wheel drive system that comes standard, whereas a lot of rivals in this market, they offer that as a premium feature, or you're paying an additional $2,000. Whereas if you are in this market and you are on a stricter budget, maybe you can't throw that additional $2,000 towards your next vehicle. Also, of course, you do have the ability to upgrade to the 2.5-liter four-cylinder engine, which is found in the Forester and Outback, which I think is really the leading reason as to why Subaru is starting to own this segment, because a lot of subcompact crossovers have powertrains that leave far more to be desired. But all in all, for 2024 and the third generation Crosstrek, this really isn't a vast departure from what we saw last year or even other prior generations. But Subaru did just enough where this now feels more refined and upscale, even for a premium. I can't wait to test drive a top trim limited or even a sport, especially with the 2.5-liter four-cylinder engine. I feel that with the stronger powertrain, we're going to notice the rigidity far more. We're going to notice the lack of road noise, and also the stiffer suspension and tighter steering is going to really match up with that powertrain. And the Crosstreks with the larger powertrain should be arriving soon, so I'll definitely get my hands on one of them for sure. Also, of course, you have the Wilderness trim making its way for this generation. And I just think that what Subaru is doing right now is that they're reinforcing this crossover, making sure that it will not leave the top spot in this segment. And if you are looking at buying a subcompact crossover right now in 2023 and you want one at around $30,000, at least when it comes to the on-road driving dynamics, I think what Subaru is giving you right now really is worthy of being a class leader. So guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe for more. Also make sure to follow me on Instagram at Boston Autoblog so you can see what I'm up to and what vehicles I'll be featuring in the future. And I will see you guys next time.